we have the former starting quarterback for the New Mexico State Aggies, Mr. Ty Houghtaling. Ty walked on at New Mexico State and quickly became the starter because of his ability to throw passes on point. He could run like Utah's Devon Dampier, and teammates wanted to follow him. And it didn't hurt that he was 6'3", 210 pounds. So welcome to the channel, Ty.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
You bet, man. You bet. So Ty, you played at NMSU in a form of the triple option offense. The only FBS teams that I know of that run an offense like that today are Air Force, Army, and Navy. So Ty, being 6'3", about 210, your game is was reminiscent to me of a Lamar Jackson type quarterback for our viewers out there that didn't get to see you play. And why I say that is that you were an elite passer. You could run on any play, and you were pretty indefensible in my view. So Ty, what type of quarterback would you say you were most like?
Well, to be honest, I wasn't the fastest guy, and I appreciate the comparison to Lamar, but I wasn't that type of athlete really. I could run, and I had some elusive moves. I could make some guys miss here and there, and because I had a little bit of weight, I could take a hit. And our offense in college was kind of a ball control. We were kind of the power I formation. Typically, we were in some version of the I, whether it was an offset fullback with a 7-yard deep tailback, and our option was probably not triple. We didn't necessarily read an interior lineman and then continue around and read a force player. Primarily, we were just going to have either quarterback run or pitch the ball to the tailback. We did have some fullback options, but that wasn't primarily what we did. And it was ball control, hit them with the run 3 or 4 times in a row. And at some point, you just felt like it was going to go maybe be a big play. Just kind of softened them up. And then, at some point, you got the blocks were just right. You lined it up just right. And you made a 20, 30, 40-yard play. And that's kind of option football.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense, man. So what was it like playing in an almost all passing offense in high school and then going to an almost all running or rushing offense in college?
You know what, Chris, if you play college football for 4 or 5 seasons, if you get that red shirt year and you play up to 5 years at a program, there's a really good chance that you're going to have a coaching change somewhere in there.
Right.
That just seems to be the current culture. And so when I came out of high school, we were primarily throw the football, pocket passer. I didn't run the ball much unless it was a called quarterback draw or something like that. Very rarely had to scramble, had 5, 6 really good receivers my senior year and could really spread the ball around. And we were prolific passing offense. But when I went to college at New Mexico State, they were throwing the ball. They were about a 70-30 throwing team. That's what they wanted to do. And so it was a good fit for me. I was a drop back quarterback. I actually came in with 2 other guys, one from Pennsylvania, one out of the DFW area. And they were both, guys who could sling the ball. And we came in as 3 freshmen. We were going to be fighting for the backup position with a senior that year going into the season in 1995. And we were going to throw the ball. But those guys, that coaching staff, had a couple of years with them, learned a bunch of football, and then they moved on. The coach Hess retired, and the rest of the staff moved on to other positions. And we brought in a group of coaches out of kind of the Nebraska, Tom Osborne, Nebraska system.
Absolutely.
And so those guys brought with them the option football. Well, the 2 guys that had come in with me, quarterbacks, they were throwers. And so they didn't want to run the option. They both, one of them ended up staying in the program and but had some injuries. And the other guy left the program, went to where he could throw the ball. And so kind of by default, that first spring, I was kind of the only guy who could really run the option. Our other guy, Greg Madsen, he was capable of doing it, but he got injured right in the first of spring practice and missed the whole spring. And which wasn't his fault. He just didn't get the reps. And so
Hmm.
the option football just became who we were. And I was probably the guy that could get it done early on and was able to get to play.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. So obviously you were born with God-given ability. But what things did you do to turn yourself into the USA Today New Mexico Player of the Year?
Well, I was blessed with some size and a little bit of speed and athletic ability, and I had two older brothers, and so I
Hmm.
give them a lot of credit. They were hard on me and they challenged me, but they taught me a lot and they supported me, and I got to watch them growing up. Got to learn the game from watching those guys play. And Artesia's a unique place, just kind of down here in southeast New Mexico, special
Right.
place close to you and I, and we
Yes.
had a great program. The football program was solid. Coach Henderson, our head football coach, was also our athletic director. He was kind of out front in those days with the throwing game, the spread
Yes.
offense. Not many folks in New Mexico were doing that, and so we were hard to defend. It was hard to get ready for us week in and week out. And Cooper was just thought the game really well, was a schemer. I loved that part of the game. I really like thinking schemes and X's and O's and understanding
Hmm.
what the defense is trying to do. And so I just thrived in that system, got to watch a lot of film, got to spend time with Coach Henderson in his office watching film and just talking football. And that really prepared me for the college experience.
Hmm.
I was able to understand, kind of conceptualize what defenses were doing, which was a big part of our offense, believe it or not. Even in the option, we were really looking at what the defense was doing by alignment, understanding who was going to be the force player, whether it was going to be a safety coming down or if it was an outside backer, knowing angles and where our strength was and being able to change plays at the line of scrimmage. Those were things that I just really enjoyed. And so I
Yeah.
kind of thrived in that. And then you couple that with some really good football players around you, and we had a pretty good offense.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. That sounds a little bit like a guy by the name of, a guy by the name of Peyton Manning. He seemed to like to do a lot of that kind of stuff too. And it ended up paying off for him, like kind of like it did for you, you know?
You
Um,
bet.
so what made you decide to choose New Mexico State?
Well, that's interesting. My older brother Jeff was just a really, really good football player. He's
Hmm.
big and strong and fast, and he got an opportunity to go to University of New Mexico out of high school with Dennis Francione, was the first year head coach at UNM, and he
Hmm.
recruited kind of the top players in New Mexico Jeff's senior year, and so we were big Lobo fans. I
You
wanted to
bet.
go to UNM. I wanted to follow Jeff. And by the time I was a senior, UNM had really started the program was really starting to turn the corner. And Jeff was a big part of that. He was kind of a building block piece of UNM. And Coach Francione was making a name for himself. And those guys didn't recruit me. They came down for the state game when I was a junior, and I had kind of played a little bit of both ways. I was starting on defense at safety, but
Hmm.
we had one of our slot receivers was banged up, so I was filling in for him and had just a really good game my junior year in the state football game. And one of the coaches from New Mexico State was there. One of the coaches from UNM was there, and the UNM coach liked me, and he told me, "Hey, we love your brother. He's a great leader. He's a good player, and we're interested. We'll see how it goes next year." And the guy from New Mexico State said, "Hey, we think you can come play for us." And so
Hmm.
I went into my senior year kind of hoping UNM would recruit me, but for whatever reason, I just wasn't going to fit their style. And the guys from New Mexico State kept in touch, and at the time, they were in a kind of a rebuilding system. They had kind of started to see some change, and they were starting to compete in the Big West, and they liked what I did as a quarterback. But they only had three. I only had two scholarships for quarterbacks, and I was going to be the third guy. And they
Hmm.
told me, "Hey, if you'll come and you'll prove yourself in 2 days, we'll be able to put you on scholarship." There were several small, Division II schools that kind of courted me, but I really wanted to go Division I. And so when they said, "If you'll come and prove that you can play, we'll get you on scholarship," I trusted them. I believed
Right.
them and made my way to New Mexico State. And they followed through. They were faithful to what they said. And I got a scholarship after 2 days were over. Kind of made my way through the first couple of weeks of football, and they rewarded me with the scholarship. And so that's kind of how that played out.
Yeah. And to all you viewers out there, Ty played for Artesia High School in, like you said, southeastern New Mexico. And if I remember right, they've won 32 state championships. I like to argue that, though, because Artesia kind of refuses to count the tie against Lovington in 1987 in the state championship as a state championship. I don't know if that's pride or what exactly, but even though the NMAA counts that, I don't believe Artesia counts that. So I always say 33 state championships, but Artesia says 32. So, but just if you can imagine, guys, 32 state championships coming out of one program. And for a number of those years, we were not the size of the largest school in the state, but we were beating the biggest schools in the state and winning state championships. And then Ty came along. If I remember right, we weren't in the top class, but every year Coach Henderson was big on scheduling the toughest big schools in the state. I mean, it wasn't just a big school. It was many times the toughest big schools in the state. And normally a lot of times we would get the best of them, and occasionally they would beat us. And it would be a close game usually, but come playoff time, we were ready to go, right?
Yeah, that's really how we kind of operated. Cooper was just knew that we would get banged up a little bit and lose a couple of pre-district games, but it was going to prepare us for our district season and then for the postseason. And I bought in. I thought it was the right way to go. Everything he said, I believed and trusted, and I trusted my coaches. And we played my senior year. We played Goddard, which is out of Roswell, New Mexico, and Goddard was a larger school at that time, and they were the year before were the state champions, and we were the year before the state champions in our division, and they were the big school. We were the next classification, and we played head to head that next season, and we were the underdogs. Artesia, of course, playing bigger school, and we got after Goddard that year. I think I threw 52 passes and ended up with just under 400 yards, and we beat them by wasn't much, but it was just an incredible game. And all that prepares you for when you get into the playoffs. You've played big games and you've felt the pressure and you've probably been beat up a little bit. And so you're ready and compete.
Yeah. When you're back in, I don't want to say back in those days, but I mean, Goddard was so good. And Roswell High went through a time where they had Dontrell Moore and a number of guys come through, and they were very good, Roswell High. And that was a little bit before Rio Rancho and all of their schools started to take over, as far as the top schools in the state. But I just want to tell the viewers that I'm looking here at an official Artesia Bulldogs program from 2012. Okay, so it's a few years old, but my dad and I have been to many games. And when I look through the record books, it is just littered with a guy by the name of Ty Houghtaling. And if I remember right, Coach Henderson was pretty well known for liking to start senior quarterbacks, correct? I mean, occasionally a junior would start, but usually he liked to have a senior start. And so it wasn't like, even if you had the ability, he really preferred that senior leadership at the quarterback position. And Artesia to this day, but under Cooper, you usually just played on one side of the ball. So even though Ty was one of the greatest athletes on the team, it wasn't like he played quarterback and free safety and an offense, one of our top offensive linemen played defensive lineman too. And yet other schools were doing that with their best players all the time. So that was pretty cutting edge for that time. And I thought pretty gutsy, but usually in my view of watching the games, it was like, the second half is when we dominated, because not only did we make adjustments at half, but we we weren't as tired out as those two-way players were. So we had a distinct advantage in that. But to the viewers out there, not that you're going to pick up an Artesia program, but first of all, they are some of the nicest programs you've ever seen for a high school program. And if you've never seen the Bulldog Bowl in Artesia, New Mexico, you've got to Google it right now because it is one of the nicest stadiums you could ever imagine. But like Ty is still like fourth or fifth in touchdown passes in the season, behind a guy by the name of Landry Jones. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of him, but he played at a small school in Oklahoma, I think. But
Yeah.
yeah, and then Josh is up here too. So Josh Houghtaling. In fact, I got to tell a kind of a quick funny story. But after you graduated, Ty, I had a good friend of mine ask me, and he continued to ask me after there were different Houghtalings that came through the system. He would always ask me, what is the first name of the Houghtaling quarterback that is going to be the quarterback at Artesia this year? Because every year it was a Houghtaling. It seemed like the Houghtaling family was quite talented. You not only had your older brothers, right, but you had cousins too, right?
Yeah, we did. Big family here locally, and pretty blessed to live in a town like this where where people treat you well and you get opportunities. And so I had Joby, my oldest brother Jeff, and then I came through, and then we got married and started having kids, and so I had
Hmm.
nephews that came through, and of course my own two sons. My oldest came through, played quarterback, and then my youngest son is a senior this year, going to be playing state football championship this Saturday, and he plays
Yes.
slot receiver for the Bulldogs. So yeah, we've been pretty fortunate to be able to play at a program that has such great tradition and such a good fan base, and I really had some really good coaches over the years, guys who just love kids and cared about Artesia and invested here, spent their lives here, and
Right.
raised their families here. And so yeah, it's a really special place.
That's awesome, man. And I 100% agree with you. And if it was 100% up to me, even though I love where my wife and my two boys currently live, if it was just solely up to me, I would just love for them to have the opportunity to grow up in Artesia like I did, because it was, I mean, I don't want to say the perfect town because there's no perfect place, but it was an ideal place for me, and I loved every minute of it. And I think it's still pretty much the same for most kids that go through the system.
Yeah, pretty special place for kids for sure.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. So, if you would tell us how difficult was your adjustment from high school football to what they call FBS now, as you know, but back then it was Division One, because God forbid we have Division One and Division Two. That we don't want to say somebody's lesser because they played Division Two, but FBS or Division One, like what was the adjustment like from high school to Division One?
Well, for sure, the expectations of strength and conditioning at the highest level of college football, it's just very different from high school. We worked out hard in high school. Our coaches did a great job with the weight room and conditioning. It was important, but I was a multi-sport athlete.
Hmm.
And the idea of training your body for that next level, I just didn't fully understand. Now, when my brother Jeff went off to UNM, and he would come back in the summer some, and he would say, "Boy, you gotta work out." He went off to college. He gained 20 pounds within the first month as a freshman in
Wow.
college, and supplements and getting in the weight room 5 days a week, and took it very seriously. And so physically, I had some growing up to do. I was about 180 pounds as a senior in high school. And so when I got to college, I knew immediately I was going to have to get in the weight room and gain some weight and get stronger. Even at the quarterback position, I needed to be able to take the physical demands of college football. And it's year round.
Yeah.
You don't get a whole lot of time off. You get a little time over Christmas, and then you're right back into the off season, and then you go into spring football. And I know that those dynamics are changing now with the evolving of college football. But in my years, it was a year-round commitment, and you didn't transfer. That you stayed where you were. Very few players transferred unless coaches left. It was just a different time in college football,
Hmm.
and you were expected to be there all summer. They would help you find a job so you could work and make a little money. You're expected to take classes all summer. You're expected to be in the weight room 5 days a week, watching film on your own.
Right.
There were some regulations about how much time you could do, but just the investment of time and effort and in your physical health
Hmm.
was the biggest adjustment that I had to go through from high school to college.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. I love hearing that. Just it's a different view on it. I can attest to that from at least a baseball perspective. I felt like I put in work when I was in high school.
Right.
I was usually always the last one to leave, and tried to be the first one there. But I put in work, but it just things came a little bit easier in high school. You didn't have to necessarily, from a baseball perspective or pitching perspective, you didn't have to worry maybe about 1 through 9, maybe one or two hitters in each lineup that you had to worry about a little bit, but you could get by and pick up 10 Ks in 5 innings and call it a day. And I remember going to play for a fairly good junior college in Colorado, along with Frank De Hoyos. And man, I started talking to guys that they allowed walk-ons there. And even though I was fully scholarshiped at the time, I was talking to all these different guys that were pitchers, and they were telling me, stuff like I was a 2-time All District or 3-time All District in my state, or I was 2-time All State, or I was 3-time All State or whatever. And I got to talking to people, and I was hearing the same story from every guy, and so I realized very early on that I had to do something to differentiate myself from those guys. And in the fall ball, like it's a competition against your teammates in a sense, because you're trying to prove yourself to the coaching staff and things like that. And so my dad, who was my best friend until he passed away just a few years ago, he and I got together and made a concerted effort that I was going to not only be the first and last to practice, but that on Fridays and Saturday nights, when in college most people would be out partying and stuff like that, especially the opposing hitters that I was going to have to face in the spring, that I was going to pull Frank and I was going to say, hey, man, let's go. Let me go throw a set, in our indoor facility. Or if he didn't want to go, I'd go work out and do strength training and do whatever I had to do, because I knew at that moment I was getting a little bit better than those hitters that I would end up having to face. And so obviously, you go from high level high school to, having to play extremely talented teams, and then playing with talented guys yourself. I'm sure that was, quite an adjustment in, yourself. And I was fortunate enough to really excel at that level. And, the Lord was just so faithful, because I think because I put in the time and the work, and I tried to always give him the glory and the honor. He not only allowed me to be first team all district, or all region, I guess is what they called it, but I was an all-American, and when I just came from little old Artesia High School, and so that those little moments of work every day, many of them are forced. They force you to go to practice, but there you do have,
Required.
yes, it's required, but you do
Mhm.
have times where you can choose to be off, or you can choose to work more. And I, at that point, decided that I have to do more work than anybody. And it wasn't like monumental changes, for you guys out there that maybe in high school, maybe you're on JV wanting to make the varsity, or maybe you're on the varsity team and you're wanting to get ahead. Well, one thing that I'll say is that if you outwork, anybody or everybody, then it's going to be hard for you not to get better. And you're not always going to see those changes in the short term, but over the course of weeks, over the course of months, you will begin to see a different athlete in you, and you will begin to be just better at your sport. So that's, I feel kind of similar to you, Ty, and the adjustment and how it's different. They definitely require you to be there more than they did in high school, for sure.
You come out of high school, you're the best player
Right.
from your high school, and you get to college and you're nobody. I mean, you're a
Exactly.
freshman,
You're a number.
you're undersized. There's
Yeah.
all these upperclassmen who are bigger, stronger, have
Yes.
been there, more experienced from bigger programs. I mean, New Mexico doesn't get recruited real hard in football because we just don't line up quite the same as the
Mm-hmm.
schools in Texas or even Arizona has really seen a boost in football players in
Mm-hmm.
California over the years, and so you've got to find a way to set
Yes.
yourself apart, and
Right.
because you're kind of nobody when you first show up.
That's absolutely right. It is not only I think it mentally is the toughest hurdle to get over, is that because your whole life, people have kind of told you that you're all right, like you're
Yeah.
good, or you're great or whatever. And for the first time in your life, people aren't necessarily telling you that right off the bat. So you have to
Oh,
figure out
they're
what
going
you're
to
going to
challenge
do.
you mentally. Yeah, they're going to
Absolutely.
find out if you're mentally tough, if you can take some hard coaching,
Yes.
see how you respond when you're not the guy. And some coaches, that's their philosophy. We're going to push this guy mentally as far as we can see until either he breaks or he finds the strength to push through. And not every coach is that way, but you're not always
Absolutely.
certain what you're going to get when you get to the next level.
Yes, and unfortunately, I never seem to come across a what they call a player's coach. It was always the opposite. Even in high school, other than really Coach Bohannon, um, all my coaches in baseball were old school coaches, man, and they would get in my face and poke me in the chest, and no answer was the right answer, and I mean, they would do everything they could to get the most out of you, and
Yeah.
so it wasn't just a physical thing, it was mentally being able to deal with that and overcome that, and so that all makes sense. But we'll go on to the next question, and we'll kind of change gears here a little bit. But, well, first of all,
Okay.
before I do that, I want to tell the viewers that I was looking up passing records for New Mexico State, and understand that, correct me if I'm wrong, Ty, but you started for 2 years at New Mexico State. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
That's 1997 to 98. So I was the starter for 22 straight games. Didn't
Okay.
didn't didn't have any injuries, which is a blessing,
That
and
was a blessing.
I
Yeah.
maybe got to really make my mark.
Yeah. So, but he wasn't. It wasn't like he was a starter for 3 or 4 years, like some guys are. But I was looking and digging, because it's not as easy to find as maybe the Alabama or Auburn records,
Sure.
But I found them, and what did I see? And so many of the top 10 passing records, but was your name sitting right there. And I wasn't totally amazed, because my dad and I watched you play. Now, they didn't have near as many games on as you can watch today, but we got to watch you play, like against Texas, when Texas was, vying for national championships. I mean, they were extremely good. How were you able to be in the top 10 of so many passing records for New Mexico State still to this day when we've been going for how many years now with teams just airing it out. It was a variation of the triple option, but the theory or the belief was basically the same, that you wanted to really establish the run and then maybe break off a big pass, every now and then. Well, that's kind of the triple option too. But
Right.
how did you uh, end up in all of those record books that I saw?
Well, philosophically, when I became the starter, we wanted to be a ball control offense. We wanted to control the tempo of the game. We would try to get out of the huddle with, 20 seconds left on the play clock, but we wouldn't necessarily snap it till we were under 5 seconds, and so we could make adjustments. And
Hmm.
again, I really enjoyed the thinking behind it and trying to get us to the best play. And over time, the coaches trusted me if I needed to change the play at the line of scrimmage from a run to a pass, that they trusted me to do that based on defenses and how they would align. When you're a running offense, teams start to stack the box. They start to bring 7, 8 guys up there right near the line of scrimmage to make it more difficult to run, which obviously puts you in a lot of man-to-man coverages. And you're able to, if you can see what they're doing and anticipate what they're doing, get out of the huddle quickly, get to the line of scrimmage, make some adjustments with your offense, whether it's alignment or sets and formations. You can find advantages in the passing game.
Hmm.
And if you've done a good job in scouting and you know where maybe there's a weakness on the other side, if there's an injury, or if you know the philosophy of the defensive coordinator that you're playing, and you can recognize some of their stunts or some of their blitz packages, and you can really take advantage of people. We had multiple ways that if we saw a particular look, which might be tipped by a safety's alignment or by a defensive lineman's pressure on their hand or some of these things, and we knew where there might be a soft spot in the throwing game. I was fortunate enough, and the coaches trusted me enough to be able to change, and so we took advantage of some really high percentage passes, which leads to
Hmm.
stacking some yardage in the throwing game. And then additionally, because we were an option team and we would just kind of pound you for a while, we would start to pull those safeties. They would lose some discipline in their coverage. And we would go from run that option, run that option, run that option to run that option, and then drop back and throw a pass over the top when a safety
Mm.
lost containment or lost 21 in front, and we would go over the top on them. So we like to make the joke that first play we're going to run is the option, and second play we're going to run is the option pass. And either way, the defense is wrong. They can't stop
Right,
either one.
right.
So it was, obviously we didn't score on every play, but you
Yeah.
get the thought that the philosophy was at some point we're going to hit you for a big play, either in the option or we're going to hit you over the top with an option pass. And then we were pretty balanced, to be honest. We were probably a 60-40 split of run pass, and that kind of had more to do with who, as me as a starter, I was a little more of a drop back guy and could throw.
Hmm.
And defensively, we my years we weren't stopping a whole lot of people. We struggled, so the
Right.
scores tend to get high. And at some point, if you're down by a couple of touchdowns, you've got to throw the ball. I mean, you don't have an option
Right,
anymore.
right.
You don't just pound it for 4 yards. You're gonna run the clock out on yourself. So we found games like that where we were behind and we had to throw. And then I like the drop back passing game and the quick game a little bit, and had a lot of success doing that.
That is classic Ty Houghtaling and being humble right there, and really not explaining how he is in the top 10 of so many passing records at New Mexico State. That's one of the things I appreciate about Ty is that's what you're going to get from Ty, and he's never going to brag too much, if anything, on himself. But I love you, man. So we'll change gears a little bit. But who are some of your favorite sports teams, or do you have any?
Well, growing up when I was young, my oldest brother was a Houston Oilers fan, and he was
Yes.
a big Bum Phillips fan and Earl Campbell, and so he was kind of my idol. My oldest brother was kind of my hero, and so growing up, I was a Houston Oilers fan. And when they got Warren Moon, that was when I was in junior high school.
Hmm.
I just thought Warren Moon was the best player to ever play the game of football. And so
Yeah.
I had posters of Warren Moon in my room. And
Oh, that's
so I've
cool.
always kind of been a Houston Oilers, Houston Texans fan now,
Okay.
and we kind of follow them. And I got to go to a couple of games some years back in Houston, and so I kind of followed them over the years. They lost their franchise, went to Tennessee. I kind of followed them a little bit with Aaron
Yeah.
McNair and some of those guys at Tennessee, and
Right.
enjoyed them. But being in New Mexico, we got to go 6 hours, 8 hours any direction to find a professional team.
Right.
And then, at the New Mexico college level, I was a big UNM fan because that's where my brother went, and was a Lobo fan forever. And we would drive to Albuquerque for the state fair, or we might go up there for
Sure.
shopping a little bit here and there. We tended to go stay in New Mexico, where a lot of folks would go over to Lubbock to Texas Tech. We tended to go
Mm-hmm.
either north to Albuquerque or to the west where my grandparents lived. And so, growing up, kind of an Oilers fan, and then
Yeah.
got off to college, and I'm a diehard New Mexico State guy. There's some people say, well, you can like other colleges even if you didn't go there, but that's not I'm a New Mexico State Aggie fan. I don't care about UT or OU or Texas Tech,
Right.
or I don't
Right.
know really who those guys are. I'm an Aggie fan, and
Yeah.
really can't stand UTEP or New Mexico or UNM.
Right.
They were
Right.
they were our biggest rivals. So, football wise, and then
That
kind
makes
of similar in
sense.
basketball. Just kind of what my brothers liked is kind of what I liked.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. I didn't really quite experience that same like intensity of the rivalry that you did. So I still find myself, even though I'm a New Mexico State, number one diehard fan. Yeah, I still, kind of find myself rooting for the Lobos. Not when they're playing New Mexico State, but
Well, we want our in-state guys to do well. Sure,
exactly,
sure.
you want your in-state schools to perform
Yeah.
well, and so I have to admit it, man. I do still root for UNM sometimes, and in different sports, but I
Well, we
can
had a quarterback, Cole McCamey from Artesia, went up and
sure,
played for UNM, and we were real proud of him and his career at UNM. And Cole came through. As I came back from college to teach here, teach and coach in Artesia, Cole was one of our upperclassmen, a junior that year that I came back. And so
mhm.
we're proud of Cole and his career up there at UNM. So we cheer from afar a little
Yeah, that
bit.
makes
As an
sense.
Aggie fan, we can
Yeah,
still
Cole
appreciate.
Cole did some work up there. I mean, he had
We did.
some good players around him. I think a guy by the name of Hank Baskett may have been a
Yeah.
wide receiver for him up there, who went on to fame, not so much for his
Dontrell Moore was
football
there.
expertise. Yes, Dontrell Moore was there, and there was a lot of New Mexico guys that were excellent on that Cole McCamey led team. But yeah, I hear you on that, man. I think if I would have played in those rivalries, I would have been a lot more against the Lobos and
Sure.
UTEP for sure. Can you tell us a little bit about your faith?
I grew up here in a small town. We went to a small church, small Baptist church. My dad was a deacon, and made sure when the doors were open that he brought his boys to church. And so that was really impactful for me as a young man. And my older two brothers were faithful men. They came to the Lord early in their lives, and when they were kiddos, and gave their lives to Christ when they were young. And I just followed suit. I heard the gospel, heard it loud and clear. I had a revival when I was probably 9 years old,
Hmm.
and accepted Christ, and it changed the course of my life. Everything about my life is now knitted around my relationship with Jesus. He's my identity, and I knew that in my teen years. Had the conviction of the Holy Spirit, and I knew that there was right and wrong, and I made some poor choices here and there, but for the most part, God was good and guided me, and went off to
Hmm.
college and saw a whole different perspective of life. And of course, I had a little insight from my brothers who had already been off to college, and they told me, hey, you're going to be challenged, your faith will be challenged,
Hmm.
both academically. You're going to run into professors and people who do not believe like we do, and they'll challenge. And then you're going to run into others who are living life a little differently, and you're going to have to decide, are you going to stay faithful, or are you going to turn? And so I had good people around me, had some good friends at college that also were faithful people, and they helped me and held me accountable to some things. Met my wife. I actually grew up just down the road from my wife, and we were kind of high school sweethearts and got married in college. And she was always right there to hold me accountable to my faith, and probably knew from a young age, Chris, that I should be in vocational ministry. I think the Lord had already called
That's
me from a
awesome.
young age.
Yeah.
But I had other plans. I wanted to teach and coach, wanted to come back to Artesia and be a part of state championships. Kind of thought I wanted to do basketball. Basketball was the sport I wasn't as talented at, but I enjoyed it, and I really liked the schemes and the X's and O's. So I kind of put a lot of effort into coaching basketball. Kind of liked having my group of guys, my 12 players, and could really mold them and pour into them. And
Hmm.
thought at some point I'd be a head basketball coach, but God's faithful. He kept calling me to more and more leadership within the church, and
Hmm.
eventually he said, "I want you to come and be a vocationally a minister." And about the third time I got that, literally got a call from a church saying, "We'd like you to consider a job." I
Hmm.
knew had to quit saying no, and so I surrendered to vocational ministry back in 2014, and have been serving here at First Baptist Church in Artesia since then. 2018, I became the lead pastor here. Before that, I was just an associate pastor, and the church went through some leadership changes, and they came to me and said, "We think you're who we want to lead us and preach for us." And so I've been doing that since 2018.
Hmm.
And there's such a good church here, First Baptist Artesia, such good people, and very generous, very kind, very graceful people. It's a fantastic church. God's been so good to us. And, growing up playing sports, investing in sports, I never, thankfully, just never fell into that trap that sports and athletics would define me.
Hmm.
I think that happens to a lot of young people. They think, well, I'm a football player, or I'm a baseball player, and that defines them. And then when that sport goes away, which invariably it's going to, you can't play forever. At some point, you're going to have to move on to some other coach. You coach till you die, but
Hmm.
physically, you just can't continue to compete at the highest level. The body just doesn't last. And
Right.
I was fortunate enough to know that my identity was in Christ, and that's who I really was. I was a Christian first and foremost, and then everything else would just flow out of that relationship. And
Yeah.
had some ups and downs. Wasn't easy. I remember staying up all night after a game against UTEP. Probably played the worst game of my life and let the team down, threw 3 interceptions. Just played terrible. I was a rival, and I just laid in bed wondering why I was even playing football.
Mm.
And God was good. He reminded me that football didn't define me, and wins and losses wasn't going to be who I was defined by. And
Yeah.
was able to bounce back and have a good career there at New Mexico State. And so faith has just been part of everything that I've ever done, including sports, my occupation, my marriage, my parenting. It defines everything about me.
It's one of the things, guys, I've always loved about Ty. It's kind of funny that I mean, not funny, but interesting that he's a pastor now. And so, some people call him a preacher, but really when I knew Ty and we got to play basketball together, I saw the Lord in him, but he didn't preach very much. He wasn't a preacher type person. He didn't, go around telling people that they were wrong to do this or wrong to do that. He just had a life that was a life of faith, and it was a somewhat quiet life, but it was a life that you could see from a distance. I myself was a guy that tried to serve the Lord throughout my growing up years, and even with Ty, when we played together, I was focused on what the Lord, had me to do, and how he wanted me to act and react in situations, and whether it was a coach or a bad game. And I was very blessed, like you, to grow up in a Christian home and with godly parents that knew the Lord, and that were my dad was a lot like you, and hopefully a lot like me, or me like him, and that we weren't preachers, even though some coaches would, when they would get mad at me, they'd call me preacher, as a way to cut me down, but
Yeah.
I didn't take offense to that because I felt like I only, was preaching, if you will, when the opportunity presented itself or whenever somebody was open or asking questions or whatever the case might be. And I think especially today, that can be the most impactful faith that you can have. And I remember a young Ty Houghtaling, but a Ty Houghtaling that had a strong faith. And there was, even though I wasn't the best captain or best leader, I did try to connect as much as I could with him, which there was tough. That was tough because we were a couple years different, and so you just run with a different group of people. But I always admired you for that, and you're still the same Ty. You live out your faith as opposed to preaching to everybody, and I know that that's something that our viewers can probably really appreciate and love. But let me before we get going too long, let me ask you a couple more questions if it's okay. And you kind of shared this a little bit, but if you could just elaborate on, like, when you were in college, how did you integrate your faith, if you will, into football?
Kind of what you said there, Chris. You got to live your faith first and foremost, and so
Hmm.
that includes everything you do. That's the words you use, the attitude you present, how you carry yourself. Your countenance. These are all factors that people are just, they're seeing, they're observing. Maybe intentionally, unintentionally, but it certainly, you got to live out your faith, number one. And so there were some convictions I had. My oldest brother would call me, and say, "Hey, how's it going? Are you praying? Are you reading your Bible?" He would challenge me, and he would remind me, you're a Christian. You got to live your faith. It just matters too much. There's too many guys around you that need to see the light of Christ in you. They're not going to necessarily see it anywhere else. And he would always tell me, you got to live above reproach. That was what he would always preach to me on the phone. And,
Mm-hmm.
at the time when you're 18, 19, 20 years old, you don't know exactly what that means. But,
Right,
I tried to
exactly.
do that. And then over time, as I stepped into more leadership on the football team, those guys that were also believers, we could kind of sense that. And I had a good role model in David Patterson, another Artesia guy that
Mm-hmm.
had grown up in the church, and he was a receiver. And so David and I would spend time after practice, and we'd get into those deep philosophical and psychological conversations about
Right.
life and this old broken world. And we'd have a great time in the locker room, and guys would kind of just hang out and listen to us as we would debate faith and
Right.
different things. And so at some point, you kind of gain a reputation as, this guy's a Christ follower. And if you want to ask questions, he's willing to answer. And I was always willing to do that. I remember we won our first conference game against the University of Nevada in Reno. And it was a big game. Nevada had won the conference the year before, and it was our first conference game in '98. And flew into Reno, and ended up winning the game right at the last of the game. Ran a 2-minute offense, went down the field and scored to win the game. And it was just huge, and we were excited, and got on the plane. And one of the receivers didn't have a very good game, guy from Detroit, and he was sitting next to me, and he was pretty down. And I told him, we won the game. Why are you acting like this? And he was down. He didn't have a good game. And he started asking me, well, what do you mean? I had a terrible game. And I said, look, it's about teamwork and this and that. Well, eventually on the flight back, I got to share the gospel with him, and,
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
say,
Yeah,
there's bigger things than having a bad game. And we always have bad games.
sure.
And you can you can really take that personally, or you can just say, hey, I had a bad game, but the Lord's with me. He's gonna always guide me. And we had a really good in-depth conversation. Got to visit with him and he was one of my receivers, and he was
Mm,
fresh to the team, that just joined that year, and was an outstanding receiver. Got to talk to him about that, and still to this day, if I see him or see him on social media, we have that relationship where he
Hmm.
knows where I stand with the Lord. Now, I'm not sure he's ever come to faith. I'm not positive, but he knows, he's heard the message, and
Absolutely.
thankfully I got to do that with him. So you'll see that the media doesn't report on that, but
No.
the NFL probably as much as any sport. And though I know Major League Baseball has a major vein of Christianity along with it as well, but
Hmm.
there's guys out there living their faith, playing professional sports, and that's very admirable.
Absolutely. And I'm finding that in my research of college football players. I've
Uh,
had a number of very talented college quarterbacks that are currently playing, and they have a heart and a passion for the Lord. And I've not been blown away that they love God, but I think I've been blown away by how in depth their faith is and how rooted it is, and how much they know their scripture and stuff like that. And so it gives me hope, man. Gives me hope.
Yeah, there's a revival going on in our college campuses right now. It's been going on for about 5 years.
Yeah.
You're not going to see it in the mainstream media, but
No.
and a major component of that is your college sports, your athletes, and you get to see them here and there when they get interviewed. You get to hear them proclaim their faith, and boy, that's inspiring. And I'm excited about that. My own son went through college, and he told me it's the Spirit's alive and active on the college campus right now, and people are coming to
Mm,
faith across the board. And football is one of those sports where you're really seeing the fruit of that,
hmm.
both at the professional level and the college level.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That is so great to see. What a great thing for revival in this country. So, Ty, the
Amen.
last question that I'll ask you is: do you have any advice, or additional advice for believers in Christ and for those who may not know Jesus?
Yeah, I think at some point in our lives, we're going to ask those big three questions. And often it is in college, but, how did I get here? How did life begin? Why am I here? Why do I exist? What's my purpose? What am I supposed to be doing? And then, of course, what happens when I'm not here? What happens when I die? Is there anything after this?
Hmm.
And so I always, as much as I can, especially with young people, they may have not come across those questions yet. They're kind of living life. They're trying to figure out what it's going to be in the future, and they're trying to figure out who they are. But at some point, we're all going to ask those big three questions, and
Hmm.
there's really only one place you can find satisfying answers. Science, philosophy, other world religions will attempt to answer those questions, but you're not going to find a satisfactory answer other than in the Bible and in the God of the Bible, and in Christ, in Jesus. That's the only place you're going to find satisfactory answers to those questions.
Yeah.
That you can trust and know that you have found truth. And that truth, just as scripture says, sets us free to be happy, to find contentment, to be joyful, to sacrifice, and to give of ourselves, to serve others, to not be self centered or self focused, or to not let this broken world destroy us or drag us down, but
Hmm.
rather to experience the abundance that can come with the relationship with Jesus. And so, those big three questions, you're going to face them at some point.
Yeah.
And really, the only true answers that you're going to find are found in Jesus, found in God, the God of the Holy Bible, because that's where truth springs from. And
Amen.
you can find some good stuff out there in philosophy, and you can
Sure.
study psychology, and there's other world religions that have some aspects that are beneficial. But the truth, the kind of truth that sets us free, it's only found in Jesus.
Amen. I want to share this with our viewers, but I don't think I've ever shared this with you guys. But my wife and we lost our firstborn child. His name was Maddox Charles, named after my dad, who's was always my earthly hero, the man that I saw Christ in from the very beginning, and who lived out an amazing life for Jesus. And when we lost our son, I think literally broke my heart. I don't think I'd felt pain like that. And I know Ty and his wife have gone through the same thing. But I was I was struggling those first few days. You know, a lot of people don't know what to do or what to say, but I finally dragged myself out of bed one day and went to the mailbox, and who did I hear from but this guy right here, Mr. Ty Houghtaling? And it was, I read words that I needed so desperately to hear, that were encouragement in the Lord and encouragement for my future, my family's future, and that there was still hope, you know, because in those early days, as Ty can attest to, it can feel pretty hopeless and pretty you're just a broken person when you lose a child. And I can't imagine the pain that you and Jennifer have had to go through and continue to go through, just like my wife and I do on a yearly basis. So, but I wanted to thank you publicly. You may have been led to do that, but you have no idea that the timing was absolutely perfect, and it came at a time in my brokenness and my sadness that I needed to hear that from you. So thank you, my
Well, we
friend.
love you guys. Chris, we love you. We love
love
Heather.
you. Yeah,
Yeah, and we're in a fraternity now, brother.
we are.
It's not one anybody wants to join, and
No,
you never want anybody to be a part of it. But we got
that's
a
right.
special bond, and
That's
it
right.
went back to high school when you were one of my heroes of the basketball team.
Thank you.
And I'm a San Francisco Giants fan because you were.
That means so
And
much, man. That brings tears to my eyes,
well,
man. I mean,
yeah,
thank you for that. You know,
yeah,
you don't realize that maybe you're making an impact on anybody, maybe. And when you hear stuff like that, it brings tears to my eyes to hear that. Thank you for
yes,
saying
sir.
that and for sharing that.
Well,
Well,
thanks for having me.
well, man, it has been amazing. We have absolutely just, I've loved having you on this program, and I know the viewers are going to fall in love with you, and hopefully we can have you back soon, man. We'll definitely, you and I will be talking soon. I appreciate you being on the program and appreciate you giving me some insight on how you did all that you did, man. I mean, because I had some questions for many years, you know, how you succeeded at such a high level in football, not only at the high school level, but in a basically pure running offense. And you kind of set my mind at ease a little bit on some of those questions I always had. So I appreciate that. But more importantly, I appreciate you sharing about your faith. That means the world to me, but I will turn it to the viewers out there. And you know, I always tell you guys that each one of you were made for a purpose, and that
Amen.
is 100% true, that there's a God out there that has a purpose for your life. So maybe you are that kid that walks the halls and nobody says hi to. Well, know that, first of all, Ty and I love you, but God loves you and has a purpose and a perfect plan for your life. And you know what? You may not be an athlete, and that's okay. God has a different purpose and plan for your life. He perfectly designed you, and he has a perfect plan that doesn't always work perfectly because life is imperfect. But if you will just, you know, admit that you're broken, that you need God in your life, he will come into your life and change you like you cannot believe. He will give you what Ty and I have, in that peace and that hope in our lives that really passes all understanding, guys. So regardless of whether you're an athlete out there that loves college football or NFL football, or you're not an athlete and you wish you were, well, hey man, there's a different purpose for your life maybe, and the cool thing is you're going to get to find out what that is. And God has blessed each and every one of you with gifts, and you will get to use those gifts if you have not used them already for the Lord, hopefully. We hope that you will give him an opportunity in your lives. Just so grateful to you, Ty, not only for being on the show, but for your friendship, for your prayers, and know that you and your family are in our prayers and in our thoughts daily. And we love you guys so much. Look forward to talking to you soon, bud.
Yes, sir. Love you guys.